Good afternoon and welcome to the Planning Commission's meeting for today, February the 20th, 19th, 2014. May I have roll call, please?
Planning Commissioners Astorian.
Here.
Landrigan. Lee.
Here.
Yesayan.
Here.
And Chairperson Manukian.
Here. May I have a report regarding the posting of the agenda?
The agenda for this meeting was posted on Wednesday, February 12, 2014, on the bulletin board outside City Hall and on the city's website.
Thank you very much. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving on to approval of the minutes from the February 5th, 2014 regular meeting. Do I have a motion?
I will move to approve the minutes as amended by staff.
Second.
It's actually just the minutes as we presented them to you.
Okay, so just move to approve the minutes as is.
Second.
Very good. Moving on to oral communications, not related to the agenda at hand. I have no cards. Moving on to zoning appeals, we have none. Planning Commission items, old business, none, new business. Wireless telecommunication facility, case number PWTF 1231805. Do I have a staff report on this matter?
Yes, Mr. Chair and Planning Commissioners. This application is to install wireless telecommunications equipment and antennas on the roof of an existing building. And this location was chosen because construction in the downtown area has blocked transmission from certain angles, and this facility is necessary to fill the gap that was created by the construction. This is for Verizon Wireless. The location is 403 South Central Avenue, and it's at the intersection of Central and Elk Avenue. Prior to going into the staff report, I would like to mention that we received an electronic correspondence related to a different matter, but the subject matter is referenced to this project, and we distributed that. The email is regarding some disturbance and loud music in the vicinity of the site. And the inquiry is asking if this hearing is related to that, and I responded that it is not. And we distributed the email that we got to the planning commissioners as well as our staff.
Understood.
Moving on, the subject building is a historic resource. It's listed on the Glendale register. As such, the application was reviewed by the Historic Commission at a public hearing, and the Historic Commission made one recommendation. It's basically to paint the visible equipment, the visible cabinets, as well as portions of the antennas, the cables extending from the antennas, a color to match the building, in order to blend them with the building. The rest of the equipment and the antennas were already specified on the plans to be painted a color to match the building. This building has a tall portion and a lower portion. The proposal will be for the tall portion of the building. The antennas will be mounted on the stairwell, on three facades of the stairwell, and the equipment will be located on the flat portion of the building. Most of the equipment will be located on the inside of the roof parapet, not extending beyond the top of the parapet. There will be 4 cabinets that will be installed on a platform. The top of these cabinets will be visible from surrounding streets, as is illustrated in the photo simulations. The Historic Commission recommended approval of the project, as I mentioned, with a condition to paint the visible cabinets and the cables extending from the antennas a color to match the building. Having said this, staff's recommendation is for approval of the project. All the conditions that are attached in the findings can be made provided the conditions are attached. The conditions are standard conditions with the exception of one condition that references the recommendation of the Historic Commission. And there's a typographical error in that condition that I would like to point out. That's on page 8 of the findings, and it's condition number 8. This condition says that the Historic Preservation Commission recommended this at the December 16, 2014 meeting. This will be in the future. The commission meeting took place on December 16, 2000. That's a typographical error that we need to correct. And the one other condition is condition number 14 on page 9 of the findings. Staff's recommendation through this condition is to grant the approval for a period of 10 years. We need to insert an expiration date. The expiration date is left blank. So if the commission approves the proposal, the date would be February 20th, 2024. That's when the permit will expire. Based on this, I would like to conclude my little presentation. Unless the commission has questions, the applicant is in the audience if there are technical questions to answer.
Very good.
To be technically correct, it will be February 18th, 19th.
Because of leap
Well-
years?
I think we can afford to give the applicant a couple of days here and there. Any other questions?
I have questions. The Historic Commission's recommendation to paint to match the building is what we see the changed recommendation, the actual, as recommended by the Commission, or is this the picture that was presented before they made that recommendation?
The photo simulations and the plans were presented to the commission. We noticed there were cables extending from the top of those antennas over the parapet to make the electrical connection. The cables were left black in the renderings, so we inquired, and they were not specified on the plans to be painted, so we recommended that condition, and the Historic Commission approved that condition.
The cable, how about the actual the antennas?
The antennas are already specified on the plans to be painted a color to match the building.
Okay, so this is, now, what's the precedent as far as, this is quite visible, the antennas
Right.
on the building, and I think the antennas that we've previously approved have been camouflaged more so than what's being presented here. So what's the precedent with these quite visible antennas of actually happening? And at what length did the applicant attempt to try to camouflage these antennas?
Well, that question probably should be posed to the applicant in case there's a difficulty to camouflage them from a technical standpoint. But to be on the safe side, because the building is listed as a historic resource, we presented the proposal to the Historic Commission as a public hearing so that the Commission can review the details of it. And as to
You mean
how-
this commission?
The Historic Preservation Commission,
Yeah. Okay.
prior to bringing this before the Planning Commission.
Yeah. Well, I'm asking about what other kinds of antennas as visible as this we've approved before, because in my mind, this is adding to the visual clutter of that neighborhood, because it's quite visible, and if you just look up slightly, you have over 6 antennas on 3 sides of the building you're going to see.
Right. The primary concern of the Historic Commission was to not alter the character of the building, the architecture of the building. And the thinking was...
I'm not talking about the Historic Commission. I'm talking about just... to meet the requirements of our ordinance, which is to reduce as much, preserve the visual character of our neighborhood as much as we can. Have we previously allowed such visible antennas on other buildings? For example, the last building that we approved antennas for, it was very well in line. It was camouflaged behind a structure, and that structural element that was added to the building added to the integrity of the building. You couldn't see the antenna. Over here, it doesn't look like there has been much attempt, other than a paint, to camouflage the antenna.
Right, and specifically it's because this is a historic building.
Oh.
The applicant has looked for other sites. This is the only location in that area that can fill a necessary gap. To propose alterations to the building, that would impact the historic resource, like providing screening or constructing something at the top of the building. So this was the least impacting way of addressing the proposal.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems interesting that if without screening it, now we might actually be bringing down the integrity of the historic building. And I'm not the last building that was here, which wasn't considered a historical asset because it hadn't been surveyed, we had our historic preservationists here. But with this building, which is definitely a historic building, we don't have, I don't see our J plat over here. So I find that lacking, that we don't have our expert on staff explaining exactly if this is actually complying or not. And I didn't actually see it in the staff report too, if he had commented on it as well.
He worked on this to take the proposal to the Historic Commission, and the analysis was that the way this is proposed, it complies with the guidelines of the state, forgot the exact term, the Department of the Interior,
yeah,
that oversees historic resources. Yeah. And we presented the findings to the Historic Commission at the time. Mm-hmm. One of the findings was that this installation is entirely reversible, so there is no permanent alteration to the building's architecture. Mm-hmm. And there were other findings that were presented to the Historic Commission, and the Historic Commission's focus was the preservation of the historic resource and the aesthetic aspect. And the Commission recommended approval with that condition, that one condition, to fill in the gaps that were not shown or specified on the plans.
Well, I would be interested to know what the applicant has done to attempt to camouflage the antennas as much as possible, and if this is really the last resort, other than the whatever limitations the historic building provides it.
Okay.
Yeah.
What we noticed also, this is the only tall building in the area.
Right.
In the vicinity, there are no other tall buildings. The advantage of the height is that it can transmit over existing obstacles, right, in the vicinity. But on the other hand, it's a tall building, and to fill a necessary gap, it may not be feasible to locate the antennas on a different site.
I mean, and my one other question is, we're not actually provided the feasibility map that shows the gap in coverage. I know it's stated that it's there, and I'm taking the word for it. It might be nice for the future applicants if that map is just provided. So I think it has been provided before.
So we can certainly insert that.
On several projects it has, but sometimes it is, sometimes it doesn't. So I think it helps me as far as to understand that, why exactly this is the very best location.
We can insert those maps as attachments. The map has been reviewed. The technical information has been reviewed by our Information Services Department.
Yeah.
And the determination was that this actually fills a necessary gap. This location fills a necessary gap that was created by the construction in the downtown area.
Mm-hmm.
So we had our technical review based on that. Jay Platt has joined the meeting.
Mr. Platt, we were just told that the proposed antennas on the building had limitations as far as the amount of camouflaging it could have because of the building's historic nature. And I'd like to hear your comment on it of how it's limiting the ability to camouflage this even more because
when the Historic Preservation Commission reviewed this proposal, the concept of camouflaging the antennas wasn't presented or considered by the Commission, except in as much as they would be painted and all of the wires and chases and anything else would be painted to match the color of the building. In general, if you were going to add some sort of camouflage screening around this, you'd actually be creating a new volume that would read as a very different volume than the historic volume, which is clearly legible underneath the antenna. Several antennae were on the building at the time that the Commission considered it for designation, and they didn't have any concern about that. They recognized tall building, rare example, these things are happening these days, and completely reversible under the Secretary of the Interior standards. So they felt that the best camouflaging would be to just accept these things for what they are, paint them to match the building, and let them look like what was already on the building at the time they first considered it.
Mm-hmm. So as far as a new structure or anything like that, it would add way too much or way too much change.
It would create a whole new architectural concept that was never there and that we wouldn't recommend being there.
Okay. Well, then if that's as far as that's considered, then I'm okay with it. I haven't really. The thing about Glendale is you don't see these antennas very much. And when you go on the other side in LA or other places, you might see a lot of these antennas, and I like how much we've preserved the integrity and of our buildings and our natural quality. And so this seemed like a first that the antennas are so exposed. So I found that surprising, and I'll just take the word for it. This was as far as trying to camouflage it, this was as much as was possible.
Okay.
Thanks.
Very good. I have one card for the applicant, Mr. Al Gamboa.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Al Gamboa with Milestone Wireless, and I'm the representative for Verizon Wireless, the applicant for this, at 403 South Central. In the early onset, we were approaching this as a sensitive situation because of Glendale's character. And we were advised by planning staff that we should treat it that way and consider any type of mitigation we could apply. The design we've proposed, in fact, is an evolution of previous designs that reflects individual box screens over the antennas So individually, they're screened to reduce the bulk as opposed to one singular large screen. They're arranged symmetrically with the larger antennas on either side so that there's not a jarring aesthetic effect. This met with supportive reaction from the Historical Commission, and I think that Verizon Wireless would be amenable to all of these conditions and the painting conditions, especially in light of the sensitivity of the building. So we are looking at it as something to give ample consideration to, and we have so far through the design process in our discussions with planning staff. We've established that from the submittal items that we provided to the information systems folks that there is now a significant gap in our coverage that was created by construction of a parking structure that completely blocked one of our arrays at its original location. So we do need to get this into service as quick. It's been a long time, but we do need to get it into service as quickly as possible, because what is happening, just for your background, with the burgeoning amount of data that's been going into the system now at Verizon Wireless and every place else, people using multimedia apps, we're running into a capacity issue. We have to introduce new technology now just to replace antennas at our existing sites. We did this on one recently on another of your sites in Glendale. But it's always done with a consideration for how it will be received by the planning departments and by the communities. And as I say, I think that's what we've tried to do, and we've done efficiently here. And if there are any questions, I'd like to answer them.
Are there any questions? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
With that, I'm closing the public comment portion of this. If there's any comments to be made by the commissioners, otherwise I'm willing to entertain a motion. And assuming that someone will be making a motion, please keep in mind that there are two alterations to the findings, right? There is that issue of the typographical error, page 8, finding 8. Right. Correct. And then there's the expiration date that we need to insert, which would be February 20th, 2024. Very good.
That's condition number 14.
Very good. So if there are no comments to be made, again, I'm willing to entertain a motion.
I will read the motion into record. Upon review and consideration of all materials and exhibits of current record relative to wireless telecommunications facility case number PWTF 1231805, located at 403 South Central Avenue, and after conducting a hearing on said matter, that the Planning Commission hereby approves said wireless telecommunications facilities case number PWTF 1231805 in accord with the findings set forth in the staff report and with the amendments suggested by the staff and reiterated by the chair in reference to condition number 8 and condition number 14.
Second.
Very good. Roll call, please.
Planning Commissioners Astorian,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Yesayan,
Yes.
and Chairperson Manoukian.
Yes. Moving on to item number 8, Community Development Department updates.
Chairman Manoukian, members of the commission, yesterday, City Council initiated a zone change that will be brought to you on March 19th, and that's just the only, or the next meeting in March, I believe it's the 19th. So that will be the only update that we have.
Thank you very much.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Zone change in regards to?
It's 10 lots that they're proposing to change a zone from industrial to IMUR, and it's in the South Glendale area.
Thank you.
Sure.
Do we have any comments from the commissioners?
None from this one.
I think yesterday the City Council approved the Arts Colony project, the YMCA. That was a very interesting project. I think there's a whole area of Glendale that the Commission doesn't review projects for understandable reasons, and I think it would be helpful if whenever the Commission, we have a commissioner, at least the staff updates, if we just know about the projects that are coming up in the following month at the City Council. For me personally, because I find out like maybe the next day that a project has been approved, and if maybe there is something that a commissioner would want to comment, because we are a recommending body, but even though we don't see these projects, it may be of interest to the commissioners for you to know that this is coming up in the next month in the downtown area. Right. The YMCA is a particular is an example. So if staff thinks it will benefit the commission, and if other commissioners think, I think it would be helpful to know what projects come up at least a month before.
Let me just chime in a bit here. On basically on the council agenda, on the Friday prior to the council,
yeah, it's up there.
It's there, and it's pretty thorough. The information on the website is pretty thorough.
Sure.
From that point of view, I mean, that's basically what we will get in our packages, to be blunt. So.
Of course, and I think I don't know if I don't always remember to check it on Friday. And I don't know, maybe the rest of you are much more diligent about it. But if I think since we are the Planning Commission, it would be useful to know this next month, these are the two projects that will be coming up for City Council, just so we're on the lookout.
I think Ms. Stockler
We have
has a
items
comment.
that are noticed. We can absolutely let you know when we have items. It's just that a lot of times projects come through, they're not public record at the time.
Right.
Once we tell you, they're public record. So as soon as it becomes available to the public, we will definitely let you know.
Very good.
Okay, that would be helpful.
Very good. With that, I think we can adjourn.
So